All right, here we go. Sorry I'm so late. We're still reading from God is Red by Brian Deloria Jr., but we're going to be reading from another chapter, a different chapter. I want to do more different kinds of books. I want to do Native American. I want to do African. I want to do Arab. I want to do Persian. I want to branch out. So we're going to be doing a lot of different kinds of readings this year, as long as I have a stable place to stay. That's it's a big deal. That's not a given these days, but I want to do as much as I can. I'm late today because I'm off. I did a lot of running around today. I actually there are 4 supermarkets near me that I go to, but none of them really sell good greens and cucumbers and vegetables. It's been rotting lately. Sometimes they sell them rotting. Sometimes they're okay. I get them home, and one day they're rotting. So I used to buy a bunch of salads and make them all at once, and then just eat them each day. But so I was in Manhattan, and I figured I'm gonna have to travel out of the borough, out of Queens, to go to the good part of town, Paisley, where white folks shop, to get greens and salad and things like that. Because doctor told me my weight is destroying my back, and when they told me how much I weighed, I couldn't believe it. Heavier than I've ever been. So I say all that to say a lot of running around. That's why I'm starting the podcast late. Let's get into the chapter. This chapter, and this is a chapter, this is something we all need to deal with. Sacred places and moral responsibility. Oh, excuse me. So let's get into it. When the tribes were forced from their aboriginal homelands and confined to small reservations, many of the tribal religious rituals were prohibited by the BIA in the 1870s and the 1880s because of an inordinately large number of Christian zealots as Indian agents. We read in chapter 14 how traditional people had to adopt various subterfuges so that their religious life could be continued. Some tribes shifted their ceremonial year to coincide with the whites' holidays and conducted their most important rituals on national holidays and Christian feast days. Especially the curious whites, explaining to curious whites that they were simply honoring George Washington and celebrating Christmas and Easter. Many shrines and holy places were located far away from the new reservation homelands, but because they were not being exploited economically or used by settlers, it was not difficult for small parties of people to go into the mountains or to remote lakes and buttes and conduct ceremonies without interference from non-Indians. As soon as you have something valuable on your property, you better believe you're gonna be pushed out. Since World War II, this situation has changed dramatically. We have seen a greatly expanded national population, the introduction of corporate farming practices that have placed formerly submarginal lands under cultivation, more extensive mining and timber industry activities, and a greatly expanded recreation industry, all of which have severely impacted the use of public lands in the United States. Few rural areas now enjoy the isolation of half a century ago, and as multiple use of lands increase, many of the sacred sites that were on public lands were threatened by visitors and subjected to new new uses. Tribal religious leaders were often able to work out informal arrangements with federal and state agencies to allow them access to these places for religious purposes. But as the personnel changed in state and federal agencies, a new generation of bureaucrats catering to developers' recreation interests and the well established economic groups who have always used public lands for a pittance began to restrict Indian access to sacred sites by establishing increasingly narrow rules and regulations for managing public lands. It's like that when you try to use a state park or city park. They don't let certain things go. In 1978, a symbolic effort to clarify the status of traditional religious practices and practitioners, Congress passed a joint resolution entitled the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. This act declared that it was the policy of Congress to protect and preserve the inherent right of American Indians to believe, express, and practice their traditional religions. The resolution identified the problem as one of a lack of knowledge or the insensitive and inflexible enforcement of federal policies and regulations. Section 2 of the resolution directed the President to require the various federal departments to evaluate their policies and procedures, report back to Congress on the results of their survey, and make recommendations for legislative action. Many people, now they don't do that process. She don't care what you do. They don't do no surveys or anything. And if they do a poll and the American people want one thing, they just do what they want. Many people assume that this resolution clarified the federal attitude toward traditional religions, and it began to be cited in litigation involving the construction of dams, roads, and management of federal lands. Almost unanimously, however, the federal courts have since ruled that the resolution did not protect or preserve the right of Indians to practice their religion and conduct ceremonies at sacred sites on public lands. Some courts even hinted darkly that any formal recognition of the existence of tribal practices would be tantamount to establishing a state religion, an interpretation that, upon analysis, is a dreadful misreading of American history and the Constitution, and may have been an effort to inflame anti-Indian feelings. A good example for making this claim was the 1988 Supreme Court decision in Lying v. Northwest Indian Cemetery Protective Association case that involved protecting the visitation rights of the traditional religious leaders of 3 tribes to sacred sites in the Chimney Rock area of the Six Rivers National Forest in Northern California. The Forest Service proposed to build a 6-mile paved road that would have opened part of the area to commercial logging. This area, known by 3 Indian tribes as the High Country, was the center of their religious and ceremonial life. The lower federal courts prohibited the construction on the road on the grounds that it would have made religious ceremonial use of the possible. I don't know what that doesn't sound right. It should be use of them. Well, I don't know, I'm not sure. Before the Supreme Court could hear the appeal, Congress passed the California Wilderness Act that made the question of constructing the road moot for all practical purposes. But the Supreme Court insisted on hearing the appeal of the Forest Service and decided deciding the religious issues. It turned the tribes down flat, ruling that free exercise clause did not prevent the government from using its property in any way it saw fit, and in effect roll back the religious use of the area completely. Let me pick up where we left off. It's a pretty good book. Very nice. And as you see, there's all kinds of organizations and institutions, and sometimes they all have their own agendas, and it's never what the people need, or hardly ever. And every once in a while, they'll do something that really helps somebody, and they'll think, oh, the last 10 years of just being incompetent in the institution, especially when it comes to helping people with social service, they want all their time before they actually help somebody get through to be erased. And life doesn't work that way. You just don't erase when people don't treat you well and then pick it up and you're friends with them again. So, I was saying that to say that, we also have to deal with our past. We must deal with our present, and we must deal with the future. And I'm so glad that the natives were allowed to go back and to keep some of their culture. And lately, in the last decade or so, they've really been going hard on it, teaching the native languages, running their own schools the way they want to with their own curriculum, allowing the children to dance in the powwows, and really trying to keep their culture at a high level, if that's the way you say it, or to keep it at a conscious level. And so I applaud them for that, and I hope they succeed at that pretty soon. And of course, when they do, black folks will be jealous. If you want to help me give directly, click the link, or become a sponsor. Until next time, take care of yourselves and be safe.